horrible thing. And I had one child who was part of the criminal justice system to a certain extent when he was younger, and he's okay now. But he got a second chance because he was white, too, and I also get that. And this is a question for Gerald, to a certain extent. I really agree with the analysis that was laid out, and at the same time, I really agree with the people who are offended by the All Lives Matter, because it's saying that somehow my son is on an equal basis with a black man who is much more likely to get killed than he is. And my son would get first degree with me too. I mean, he walked out of court, got in probation instead of the felony sentence he could have gotten to prison. And he said, this is one day I'm really glad I'm white. And that to me says a lot about why people resent that All Lives Matter slogan. And the subjective matters. I do disagree that it's only about the objective. The subjective does matter, and I think we have to be sensitive to that subjective. And at the same time, I really support broadening out the movement and trying to live our lives as if all lives matter, regardless of what slogans we use.
Okay, thank you very much, Millie. What's he doing?
A little bit of what I wanted to say has already been said, but the question about are police given psychological tests, and I do believe that the answer to that is yes. And also they are trying to find that a few of those people who basically don't have any morals and become a certain enforcer type within the police. I have a sister-in-law whose sister was married to a CHIP officer, and he beat the shit out of her because that's the kind of person he was, and that's the kind of person they sometimes pull in. They aren't all, like that, but it's systemic. Because when you look at all of these things that have happened, it isn't just the police who shot the various people. It is the DA who didn't prosecute. It is the coroner who didn't find the actual reality in the autopsy. It's all along the process. So it's the whole system that we have to change. And the one thing, Gerald, I really appreciate the stress that we have to break down those black and white barriers. We have to start liking each other and trusting each other. Although I will say, it's hard to trust in this current environment. It's very hard to trust. But those barriers are so intentional. The barriers between black and white and all sorts of other barriers. Male and female, they use whatever they can. And the police are the enforcers. Systemic. Thank you.
But I think that this is a big mistake. The police force has set up a structure for itself which insulates itself from the rest of society. The Bill of Rights has been mentioned. The obedience statutes that have been enhanced for the last 20 years mean that every cop has the right to give military commands, and you have to militarily obey those commands. Otherwise, you're breaking the law. Now, when one cop shoots somebody, you have all these people in the same association, the same organization, who are part of an organization that cleans that up and says that killing was okay. That makes every other cop in that organization an accessory. No doubt, no two ways about it. When you see a cop on the street, you are looking at an accessory to murder.
Yeah.
That's a felony.
Right.
Okay? Now, the cops could break out of this by saying, hey, we don't support cops killing people, and we want to do something about the cops who are killing people. Have you ever heard of a single cop who is on the payroll of a police force in the United States in the last 50 years say anything like that?
Yes.
No. Okay? Now, what's going on is that the police have become the most powerful political force in every city in the United States. They did it two ways. One, by pushing drugs and using the drug war to get bigger appropriations for the crime problem the drugs create in these neighborhoods and beef themselves up. And the other is by attacking black communities. Black people may not be the majority of victims of police shootings, but the police concentrate on black communities, and the vast majority, 70% of all the prisoners in the United States, the largest prison system in the world, are people of color. Now, what that does is it criminalizes all people of color in the eyes of the rest of the population of the United States. That's black and white. I hate to say it, but that's what it is. Now, when the cops do anything, they're going to be looked at as that line that stands between the white United States and those that they have criminalized, and the white United States which supports that criminalization.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts about some things that have been said. The cops are almost in they're not a class, but they're almost like a protected caste, like Bengal tigers or something like that, except they treat Bengal tigers a lot worse. The other day, the Hayward cop Scott Lunger was killed. By Friday, they found a alleged suspect, had all these charges guaranteed that he'd get the death penalty if convicted. Say he was laying in wait, even the initial charges said there was a spontaneous shooting, assuming this guy is even guilty. Whereas even though few occasions when police are charged with killing an unarmed person, they're never charged with first-degree murder. There's been premeditation. But if somebody kills a cop, I guess premeditation is 1/10 of 1 second. Yep. So the early edition of Sunday's Chronicle, they have charges and police saying, claim there were hundreds of cops that turned out for the initial hearing. When the funeral, basically, it'd be a good time for bank robbers to go to work because there are probably 20,000 cops. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. And probably fly them in from New York, Boston, everywhere. They take care of their own. We should do the same. Also on the same page, by the way, it may sound unrelated, but somewhat similar, terrorism charges for animal rights activists. These two kids are facing 20 years in prison for letting minks out of their cages.
Yeah, I noticed that.
20 years in prison for letting minks out of their cages. Now we can debate the merits of animal rights. I'm somewhat sympathetic, but I have some differences too. But think about it. But the shooter, the last Rhodesian, quote unquote, in South Carolina, they still haven't called that terrorism. So the hypocrisy is so blatant. And one last thing is people have commented on, it isn't a matter of every individual cop. The fact is, I remember when Oscar Grant was murdered, I don't know how many well-meaning activists would say, I have a cousin that's a cop and he said he was appalled by it, or I have a brother-in-law that is a BART cop. But guess what? Not one of them stepped forward. Now you may argue, if they did, if they're a BART cop, they might find themselves on the third rail, and I don't mean that metaphorically. There's probably reasons, but still, what sort of institution? Every institution, every occupation might protect their own, but not to the extent of that. I've been a union shop steward in the past, and we would never condone somebody murdering a customer, let's say. Come on. So anyway, the police stand behind their own, and that's the problem. The problem is institutional. Thank you.
I'm a public worker in Richmond, California. I help edit the Class 4 as a member of the Communist Workers Group. I appreciate that the brother talked about self-defense. and the replacement of the cops with self-defense by the working class, multiracial self-defense guards is the only way that we can protect the working class, immigrants, black and brown communities. The way the issue was raised before about jailing killer cops and indictments, and the question is who's going to jail the killer cops if we've already laid out here that the institution of the police is the control of the state, and the state, as the brothers explained, is the capitalist state that protects the 1%, which means that we need to have our own institutions that that build our own defense and build our own organizations of democracy, not depend on so-called citizens' review boards. We've had them for dozens and dozens of years, and what they end up being is whitewash boards. So we can't count on civilian review boards. We have to have our own workers' tribunals organized by our own organizations, by our community organizations, our trade unions. One of the things we bring up in our paper is a resolution we want to push in the trade unions, and discussed it at my workplace in the Inter-Union Organizing Committee, which is that the trade union movement has to throw the cop, police, benevolent associations and their unions out of the federations of unions. They are not workers. They do not produce value. Their job is to protect and serve the 1%, and therefore they will always be brought out to crush strikes, and they're inherently anti-working class, and so we have to advocate to throw them out of the trade unions. And I would call on the Peace and Freedom Party to add that to their plan, to throw the police out of the trade union movement. And the AFL-CIO, SEIU asked me very many of these trade unions, because they are tied to the capitalist parties through the leaderships of these trade union movements. They're tied directly to the capitalist class, to the chief enforcement body of world imperialism, which is our president, which is the top cop of the world, who can be saying all lives matter at the same time that he has Drone Tuesday and is killing people down. So my only problem with all lives matter is that it was a reactionary response to the Black Lives Matter demand. And I understand, we all agree that all lives matter, even though my gut feeling when I saw the Queen giving a Zig Heil statement in the Manchester Sun is, you know, off with their heads like they did in 1789. Of course I don't want to chop off the Queen's head, but we want to take away their power and their property and put it in the hands of the working class. So that's the task at hand, and that's the only way we're going to end police brutality and racism. Thank you.
Conclusion that they're a racket. They are there to protect and serve private property and the 1%. They are used to break up our strikes. They are used to keep us in line. They intimidate our demonstrations. And we pay for them. If we pay taxes, we're paying the wages and benefits of the police, and they're the ones who come after us. They smash our heads in during demonstrations, and they gun down our brothers, our sisters, fathers, mothers, cousins. So that's one point. The other point that I want to make is that they have become highly militarized, where small towns in the middle of nowhere, the police now have, they all have tasers. Small cities have tanks that they get from the military. They get funding for all these weapons and equipment, and it's sort of a, you know, spend it or you don't get it next year. And so there's a lot more capability of the police to do a lot more damage to us